Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar on Guide's EFIN Essentials product. We're going to be covering the three products that make up the bundle and how they enhance and extend the capabilities of EFIN, Enterprise Financials. I also do want to make note that these three products can also be used with IFM customers if that's what you're running. They are IDF based from a UI perspective, so either PowerLink or NetLink essentially is the user interface, but they can provide the same capability if you're running IFM today versus EFIN. So my name is Randy Kenny. I am the Guide Products Manager and have worked in various capacities with the XA ERP system for over 30 years now, all the way back to the Mapix 2 days, if anyone else is that old and remembers that. We also have Claire Karlberg, one of our senior application consultants, and she's actually the designer of these three products and has worked closely with our technical team to bring to life what we will show you today. And also Wendy Broom, our marketing director at Guide. And certainly between the three of us, we can follow up as needed after today's webinar. I guess from a logistics standpoint, since this is a webinar format and everyone's mics are muted, we'd encourage you to use the chat feature and ask any questions you have as we go throughout the webinar. We'll save time at the end to address any of your questions. We can also certainly arrange a more personalized and interactive demo with your company if what you see is of interest and would like to expose others in your organization to the benefits of the products, or just ask more specific questions to your specific business needs. We'd be glad to follow up with a, like I said, more personalized demo. This webinar recording will also be available on our YouTube channel, and Wendy will send the link to everyone that registered. So with that as an intro, let's jump right into it. We'll start with some PowerPoint slides just to set the background and then get into a live demo. So Claire, with that, it's all yours. I think you can just share your screen and should be good to go.
Good morning. I was looking through the list of attendees, some familiar faces, some new. There's about 40 slides, and then we do have kind of a live demo of the product in one of our test environments. So again, purpose of which is the EFIN Essentials. Randy mentioned he's been with Guide for a long time, with Infor for a long time. I started in the early 2000s at really 7-8 with IFM, with a couple other older legacy products. So in a lot of ways, this IFM movement towards enterprise financials is kind of really what I've known. And as Randy mentioned, I quote unquote designed these, but not really. It came out of a necessity. If you get a repetitive question from a customer base where you have to develop the same thing 3 or 4 times, it's an opportunity to standardize and shorten the time frame for development. So just a quick kind of top side from an agenda perspective, we're going to talk about what is our EFIN Essentials package, what 3 products we have in there currently, what the future of enterprise financials essentials looks like. We have 3 additional products that are somewhat in development, but that list grows each time you have a request, again, that's somewhat repetitive. It's a common ask or a common problem, not necessarily a limitation of the software, but sometimes it's business specific or industry specific. We'll wrap up with a little Q&A, and then as Rainey mentioned, please use that chat feature for the short term. So our EFIN Essentials Toolkit is essentially an add-on to the Infor XA Enterprise Financials financial module. It also utilizes works with IFM. It's a set of utilities that essentially add capability that you can't natively do. These are mostly user-facing, meaning there will be a little bit of tech talk in here as far as how the footprint works within the install base of XA, but for the most part, it's from a user perspective, what does that mean to me and where I might pick up some productivity. So anybody at really 7-8 with IFM and above, these would be applicable for that install. So we have what we call a bank file utility, a personal ledger aging, and also a bank reconciliation product. Our bank file utility, I think, is probably the one that carries the most weight. It is also the most technical. More and more now, businesses are moving towards an electronic payment method. This follows, where Europe was 10 years ago, but we hear a lot more about ACH files and requests for positive pay, or an electronic credit card authorization, or any number of ways in which you want to communicate financial information with your bank. Traditionally, and 10 years ago, if that was a request that came through our technical team, suddenly there's a statement of work, you were looking at a file layout, it's bank specific, it's programming, it's in green screen, and all of that from a user perspective means I have to contact somebody else in order to manage my process. This bank file utility brings all of that customization into PowerLink. So as easy as it is to maintain a view and a subset in a particular card file in PowerLink, that's what this bank file utility does. It is a series of preset file formats. We have included a positive pay file format, an ACH or a NACHA payment format, and something that was pretty heavily used a number of years ago called a virtual payment authorization. What's great about this product is that from a again, from a user perspective, it's customizable. It's all within PowerLink. It saves things as a CSV, and it's all visually user-facing, very appealing, kind of end-to-end. It utilizes a couple of different things as far as the setup with both vendors and settlement methods, which we'll kind of cover a little bit in some other slides. But again, if you look at the product, this is probably 60% of the benefit. So what I mentioned was the segments are configurable in PowerLink. What you'll see on the right-hand side is our preset default for a NACHA or an ACH file. That is an industry standard file format. And so what we were able to do was to set it up one time. And where we see things that would be variable per install is your personal banking information, your routing number, maybe your account number. So what they're labeled as is account number. So I would click on it, you hit the pencil, I add my account number. The barrier to implementation is so much lower because it's all within PowerLink. Some other things that are available, and if you're going to create from scratch, is you can configure the segment lengths for segments for length, alphanumeric, the sequence, decimal alignment, format it, whether it's a date field or whatnot. And you can add or subtract, modify as much as needed. When you drill into each of these NACHA or EFT file formats, each of them have, again, kind of industry standard information. So in that bottom screenshot, if I were updating my own routing number, I would highlight attribute 40, hit the pencil on the right-hand side, update my routing number. I'm not changing the orientation of the output, I'm just adding relevant information. And again, there is, specifically on this particular output, there is, I don't want to exaggerate, but I probably will. I think there's 120 fields or, a large enough amount where we could create a baseline and get you, say, to second base. And what you're going to do is maintain it for your business specific accounting information and your banking specific information. From a user perspective, so that's kind of on the back end as far as it's a one-time setup to create an export, or not an export, but an output file. User perspective says I have to create a payment list or some sort of output where I am eligible then to create an electronic file. What you'll know if you've worked with either IFM or Enterprise Financials is when you look at a payment list status wise, until you get to a status 5 or complete, 3, I can't print a check because I haven't recorded it in my general ledger. So the criteria for this bank file generation is that I have to have completed the entire process within XA. The payment list has to be at a status of 5 or complete. And then I can generate a positive pay file. So there's 2 business objects that are associated with that. The top one is eligible payment lists for electronic output. Now it says positive pay, but really that could be a user-defined file format. It could be a positive pay output. It could be an ACH output. It could be some sort of virtual payment, for credit card or whatnot, but it is just it's a base file built over the payment list object. The second business object is the GTE positive pays detail. Now, What you'll know, and I'm an accountant, so I get to joke about it, but what you'll know from an accounting perspective, most of the time, somebody in this role wants to control the information and preview it ahead of time. That's the nature of the accounting group, if you will. So the bottom business object is a preview. How do I know that I can trust what's going to be in that file, that all my vendors have been set up correctly, that the settlement method has been assigned correctly? I want to preview before I trust and verify the output. So the positive pay detail is going to be a list of what's included prior to generating the file. The output, in this case, we have it as an Infor attachment within XA. It also lives on the IFS. So most commonly, we see people build a File Explorer shortcut to their desktop, and then you'd have a text file. They are indexed based on format type. So if, for example, you generate 150 different payments on a particular day and they are split into 3 different outputs. I have regular checks which require a positive pay file. I have, ACHs which require something, and then I maybe have a user-defined format. Natively, XA will split them into 3 different payment lists. So this product will take that settlement method and it indexes them by type and by date. So there is some organization there, which is pretty helpful for people who then would typically take this file and upload it to a bank. What we have created as a baseline, as I mentioned, is we have a NACHA or ACH or EFT format. We also have a positive pay standard format. This is what we have seen over the last, I will say, 10 years, has been the most consistent in that 80% of it may be applicable. 20% may need to be modified for something that's your bank specific. And then we also have seen the uptick of what we call a VPA or a vendor or virtual payment authorization. So those are the 3 standard file formats that are included in the product. Additionally, you can copy from these and create from scratch, or copy from them or create from scratch any particular type of output that you might require. So for a positive pay file format, there's 12 fields that are included. And again, I mentioned things like your bank number, your account number. These are a default placeholder in a sequence of fields, but you're not beholden to use it as is. What you'll notice again in the top screenshot is an example of, I'm going into my guide EFIN Essentials folder. It's called GEE as a directory, and I go into my positive pay directory, and then I have indexed all of the positive pay output that I've ever done. The output, again, based on my format that I've created, and again, I could modify it, is that I have a text file with information including vendor number, payment amount, and check. The next product is a personal ledger aging product. What you may notice is that if you've had exposure to AM, some of this mirrors functionality that existed in AM and didn't quite carry forward into both IFM and enterprise financials. Again, came from a place of repetitive requests for the same information. And more importantly, from a user perspective, if you see, nearly every, in my case, nearly every customer that uses both IFM and enterprise financials, if you are doing the same thing in Excel, either weekly or monthly, there was an opportunity to streamline that same process, which is how this product came about. The personal ledger aging is essentially putting your aging in PowerLink rather than on a spool file, rather than as an export in Excel with fancy formulas. I was a user with IFM prior to coming with Guide, and it was very early on that I said, this is silly that I export it every single time. Here, I'm going to build a macro. Here, I'm going to build like a complicated formula. But instead, what if you could just look at it in PowerLink? So this particular product is built onto the native output of the XA host job. If you're familiar with how to age either payables or receivables, it is a host job that kicks it off, and we consume that information, put it into PowerLink. Pretty conceptually simple. What I think is beneficial, again, from a user perspective for this personal ledger aging, is it doesn't change my process. I can reformat all of my data and rename my columns as quickly as I could in any other object. So training and implementation on this is pretty fast. If you already know how to age something, you just see it differently. I'm going to call it current. I'm going to call it 1 to 30. I'm going to call it 31 to 60 as a column header. There's not a lot of technical information or even really education around it. It's a matter of implementing it and making it your own. What's great also is that if you've dealt with the output of the aging within XA, you'll notice you are somewhat constrained to the size of paper you have. This allows you to have up to 99 aging buckets looking into the past or into the future, not limited in any number of ways because you are not limited based on space on paper. We've seen people look at their accounts receivable and use it for cash forecasting rather than collections. I've seen, a number of different ways in which you then change the way in which you age your transactions because suddenly I can see it differently in PowerLink. Because it is existing within the same process of that host job within XA, you can use multiple aging structures and it builds a file that allows you to look at them kind of in a comparison basis. A lot of times this will drive process change to say daily, I want to use a daily aging, month end, I want to use a month end aging because I could always revert back to that month end aging as reference. It's really easily exportable because it's in PowerLink. It just saves the step of aging it yourself. As mentioned, it piggybacks on IFM, so that personal ledger aging. And within enterprise financials and IFM, there's no way to kind of on demand look at what is the aging. Whereas in AM, you could look at it a little differently. Right now, it's 2 reports for the summary and the detail. They're both paper. This personal ledger aging product allows you to see it, say, from customer holds. If you have something on credit hold and you want to click on your entity and see where things are outstanding, you could. If you wanted to look at it in total to look at everything that's over 90, you can look at it as a single customer line as summary or a list of all transactions. There's a number of ways in which you can kind of slice and dice that information. It's kind of a choose your own adventure, if you will, in that how you use the product is dependent on your business. When you have a large volume of transactions, we see people use the summary option more frequently than the detail option. Where you have larger dollar value or lower volume, we see a lot more people use the detail option, but both are available. The other piece that I think is very helpful, again, from an implementation standpoint, is we built a scheduling tool that allows you to auto age your personal ledger. It mimics that host job option. And what's nice is that this is using the IBM job schedule utility. It's nothing more than a version in PowerLink. And as mentioned, you can change the aging structure. So if you were to do daily aging versus month-end aging, all of it runs at a particular time. You can grab that information and not have to have it be a business process for somebody to run. You'll see this is a screenshot from NetLink. This is all available in NetLink as well. It's interchangeable. And in this case, it's just a drill down into that scheduling utility. You can schedule whether or not it's a daily, Tuesday, Thursday, maybe it's a Sunday night. Each of the parameters are subject to user interpretation and customization. As always, it can be done through a host job on demand. Oftentimes we see this as a helpful tool, mostly at month end, where if something were to have run overnight, I've done a bunch of updates. Maybe I'm applying unallocated cash. Maybe I'm cleaning up, a remittance that came in late, mostly on the customer invoice side. You could always re-age and it will be reflected the same within the product within PowerLink. So the output, like I mentioned, it can be aged based on the financial division, the personal ledger, or the particular account. So in general, I could age all of company one, and that would be helpful from a holistic standpoint of maybe you don't have product line designation or different AR ledgers. I could do it from the personal ledger, so but either AP or AR, or I can age from the personal account, which means I can create a list, a subset, any number of ways in which I might want to segregate that personal account information into an aging of sorts. So what we'll see in the top screenshot is that there's two business objects that kind of look like line graphs. The one that is circled in red is the GTE, aging summary. That is going to give you one list, in this case, accounts payable, one line per vendor with the totals aged in buckets. I like this statement. The personal ledger aging puts in PowerLink, but users have been recreating for years in Excel. And if you've ever been in either AP or AR, that's a very true statement. What used to happen is an export, you'll love that screenshot is super old, from an older version of Windows. You'd export it or import the data into Excel and you create a formula to age things. Whereas now in that bottom screenshot, you'll see it says aging column 1, aging column 2, aging column 3. When I say the implementation is fairly simple, it's that if I want to rename that column, I know that it's current. I double click on it, I change my column header. Next column, I can change it from 1 to 15. Aging column 3 suddenly becomes 16 to 30. How you set this up is really kind of a limiting time factor as far as the applicability and how people use it. So again, in this case, the aging was from the AP ledger, so from the financial division, and then the AP ledger for company 1. And in this case, it's going to age. You'll notice there's many transactions for each entity. So in the bottom screenshot, first 2 lines are for the same entity. That is the detail option. The final product is the bank reconciliation product. This is independent of the bank reconciliation product from a technical standpoint or the bank reconciliation process, excuse me, from a technical standpoint that exists within XA. The reason being is that if you've used the bank reconciliation in IFM, which is what's used within Enterprise Financials now, it remains as a green screen reconciliation process. From a user perspective, the feedback was, I'm tired of scrolling up and scrolling down. I can only see 10 things. Filtering is hard. It's still kind of a batch process. What I'd love to do is, again, depending on volume and depending on how you set up your banking relationship, I may have more than one person that is reconciling information. So I want to be able to split this into a meaningful workflow. This product originally was created out of a need to reconcile the bank account daily. There were so many transactions and there were 4 people that managed 2 different banks that I need to build workspaces in PowerLink in order to make this bank reconciliation process even close to being maintainable daily. Otherwise, you get to the end of the month and you're going to hire a whole new person just to manage that bank rec. So this product puts that bank reconciliation process in PowerLink without conflicting with the native bank rec process within XA. And the reason being is that we expect at some point there will be a change to that bank reconciliation process to move it into PowerLink. We don't ever want to conflict with future development. It's highly configurable, doesn't require essentially a 2-phased approach to build a header and then to add detail. It's a single source for all of your payments. So that could be, wires or ACHs or PayPal, electronic payments. How you build this, typically through a workspace, it changes the way and how frequently and how accurately people are reconciling their cash transactions. It's customizable just like everything within PowerLink. But again, workspaces tend to be the key on this one. The installation, implementation, and education I'll make mention of is that there's a user guide that comes with this product. There's a user guide that comes with the personal ledger aging product. And especially these two, the personal ledger aging and the bank rec, they are intended to be almost self-sufficient, where you'd install it, you have a user guide, you're going to make it your own, which I think for a lot of people is really attractive as far as timeline for implementation and also cost. What our bank reconciliation product does is essentially you select whichever number of fields make sense for your selection criteria. Again, if you were doing weekly reconciliation, which is what that screenshot shows, I'm going to pick all of the checks that reconciled in week 4 of December. Now, maybe the next reconciliation group that I do, and again, you don't have to do it by group, but this process tends to still kind of be batched in your bank, and your bank statement kind of looks that way. So we mirrored it based on what we know people do, not necessarily what's best practice. So keep that in mind. Batch processing isn't always great, but in this case, I might do all of my week 4 checks, and the next batch of information I might choose to reconcile might be ACHs or inbound wires or outbound PayPal transactions or whatever it might be. What happens when I select those and elect to have them reconciled is that it's going to add a date and a timestamp, the user, and it's also going to mark it as reconciled. We did mirror some of the same functionality that exists in the bank rec, which is in the second screenshot where it says options, where there's a reference or a narrative. Those are not required, but they can be helpful, and it depends on the process in which you use them as to whether or not they're meaningful. So what you'll notice is the output, once I've elected to reconcile those 4, is that it put my name on it, I have a reconciliation date, and it's reconciled equals yes. Just similarly, you'll see on the 3rd line down, there is a reconciled item that says reconciled no and has a username on it. If any of you met Dan Miller, you know. The reason that one is that way is it's very intentional. That has been marked as reconciled and then unreconciled. So I want to make sure that we know that we touched it at some point, just in case there's a question. What's also available then is natively, and again, these subsets and views are kind of a best guess at getting you to a point where they're helpful to then customize and personalize for your business. It's an outstanding transaction report. Everything where it is reconciled equals no. Again, you could add to that things like transaction type is X, dates are Y. It has an issued check number. It does not have an issued check number. Something else that people have found helpful when it comes to either kind of internal audit or external validation, I can print using the report function within XA a date and a time-stamped PDF that says this is how my outstanding checks looked at a particular date. All right, moving into the future of what we have in development for Enterprise Financials Essentials. We have 3 that have been in the works for a little while, and all of which in kind of varying states of development. And this list has actually grown a bit. I haven't added a few more, but again, most of these come from repetitive requests. My goal in this is to provide products to people in which you can use in a short time frame with limited kind of ramp up, reducing the cost, and putting more confidence in EFIN in itself. The more that we can do to change productivity, the more buy-in you get. And so the cash and invoice uploads came from 2 different requests. One on cash is I work with a big box store. There's so many deductions. My remittance is 2,000 lines long. Why would I want to type that? Conversely, on the AP side, I want to upload all of my credit card transactions to create an invoice. I want to code it in Excel because actually I built an interface in my credit card portal that includes my GL. If I get all the information and it's available in Excel, why am I not using it from Excel? So our cash and invoice uploads does utilize our System Link Toolkit product. They're part of the licensing from the objects are, but the training and the product are an add-on. The second piece again came from a place of necessity where oftentimes the financial module will consume kind of all the sins of the company. And if you get all the way down to accounts payable and the combination of, say, warehouse and item class isn't in line with a product line, you're too late. Everything's already happened. So our data validation product is a bolt-on. don't hold me to this. I think it's a user exit on most of the order creation, also transaction creation in our subsystems, which says things like, I'm going to validate the item accounting class to item warehouse to maybe a different user defined field to combination creates a product line financial reporting. If you don't stop all those transactions or even the base information at the time that it starts, suddenly you're chasing things at when it's too late. Lastly, we have an add-on for AR collections. It adds comments, persons contacted, follow-up dates, and etc. So the cash upload and the same thing, so the cash upload, essentially, anytime that you're going to get a customer remittance information in Excel, and whether or not that's a bank portal or whether or not it's a customer portal, sometimes you can even, pull it off of a PDF. That is faster than hand entering. So our product does 3 steps. It creates a cash header. It allocates to available invoices with there's some logic to it. And then it actually does not post it. So that's inaccurate. It leaves it as unposted intentionally. So what you'll see is that, again, in green screen, you're limited to 10 at a time. This one has 391 different invoices that are available, and it allows you to create the header, allocate them, and again, it leaves it as unposted because we have found people like to review it. So and again, similarly on an invoice upload, this would be from accounts payable, but certainly could be used for other things as well. Credit card invoices, single invoice, hundreds of charges, depending on what it is. If you have anything available in Excel, this school of thought was, let's go ahead and utilize what that is rather than manually enter it again. So what the product creates again is a header and charge lines, including quantity and dollar amount. And then it again leaves it as unposted. The validation program, like I mentioned, it came out of a necessity for typically product line financial reporting, where subsystem information, subsystem attributes, which aren't necessarily part of either a GL interface or anything else that is financially focused at the time of entry. This validation program would allow for maintenance in PowerLink for a matrix of allowable combinations. I like to highlight it stops bad data at the time that it's created. So what you'll see in the screenshots are an example of a couple of different errors. One on the right is from a creation of a manufacturing order. The one on the left is from a purchase order. What we have within a purchase order is you have a department. Well, what is to say I couldn't put department this with, nature that on a purchase order? Right now, there's nothing that would stop you. Well, this product would allow you to, again, kind of create matrix of allowable combinations to ensure that you have business relevant, accurate information at the time of entry. In the AR collections product, there are a lot out there that do AR collections differently. Some of them better, some of them more complex, certainly more expensive. This is, I would say, a skeleton of what some people may need. I would not say that for those that are heavy into collections, this may not be the right fit, but what it does do is for most people that have a little bit of that, I want to be able to maintain at least what I know that I'm doing. So things like comments, you could add a comment both to the customer or the customer invoice. It also has the ability to purge and remove comments. You can also sort, select, and filter based on collectability, last contact date, follow-up date, or method of contact. It is a pretty cool add-on for most people that they're putting that information into a comment or maybe in a spreadsheet. Otherwise, why would you not want it in a central place that you could utilize, across shared departments or shared workflow? Again, some of the fields that are included, these are user-defined fields. So like collectability is number 3. These are things that you could change. If it's new, you're unsure, uncollectible, in dispute, not likely, not collectible. There may be other things like, bankrupt, acquired, promised at the end of next year, whatever it may make sense. But these are kind of the baseline, again, to get you started to a place where you can rely on it, and then there might be business specific requirements. we're actually not going to do questions just yet. I want to walk through a little bit about, and I'm in PowerLink. Again, it's where I live because I'm on a remote connection. What the product looks like installed. It has a particular card file and card. These are the business objects that are included. And I want to show you from the bank file utility first, kind of how easy it is to start what I would say technical footprint of it. We do utilize some of the native functionality as far as the creation of banks, and those banks are assigned to cash ledgers, and there's settlement methods, and there's a number of I would say enterprise financials or IFM mandatory setup that's required to get to this point. But if, for example, I now am going to bank with, we're going to call it Chase, because I drove by one the other day. I have nothing yet for my bank that I've just created. I have a new account. I'm going to now be drawing checks from here. So I want to copy in what is my standard format. Oh, you know what, though? I really do need to. I'm going to change my account number because I know it's. Okay, so I've started. That's as quick as now, assuming I have a vendor or an entity in a personal account that is assigned to a settlement method that has an output of positive pay, and I draw a check or a payment list from my bank of Chase, I will now get this output. So technically, it does take a little bit, usually with our technical team. My role in it is mostly user facing, a little bit of the education. And then we build out a process for your specific need on that bank file output. Once you've set up your bank file output, again, I cut some checks the other day. I'm now eligible to generate a file. But if I wanted to show you what that looked like, I have in this business object, this is AP amounts due. I have open invoices for a particular vendor. I'm going to cherry pick, couple, we'll pay those guys. How a user and how a normal payment authorization, payment list process works. We're circumventing kind of all of that and just getting to the data of it. What you notice now is all of those invoices that have been highlighted have an outstanding amount of 0. What has been generated is a series of cash transactions from today. And I now, in my positive pay, I have an eligible payment list that I could generate a file from. So again, I would elect to generate a text file or a CSV. Because this is a positive pay output on this particular bank combination, that is what I would get. But ultimately, how you structure your payment list selection could be commingled with a number of electronic outputs. So this view is only indicative of, settlement method of US check. But if you had a settlement method of anything else, you would be able to generate those files as well. Just close. From an AR perspective, again, what I like to look at is, what I know to be true, which is that this customer, we're shifting to the personal ledger aging. This customer has a total of $58,000 of outstanding stuff, some of which is fairly old. what I would expect is that if I want to look at so if I look at my AR balance on this, I can see this here. This is native. I can see my totals. I can see, some balances, but this doesn't necessarily let me, I'd have to get, again, these two are our product, but if I really want to know what makes up this 90 days, I really want to see those 3 transactions from 2012. Well, I could look here and I can, okay, yes, these are all very old. That makes sense to me. What the difference between this view now and what we see from a personal ledger aging product is that now when I look at my personal account, these business objects are part of the product. Or sorry, these links here. It exists from the entity, from the personal account, from the financial division, and from the ledger itself. So I could have looked at these same objects from the AR ledger, but I want to look at so again, you can hide these things. These are native as part of the spool file. We want to retain as much kind of source information as possible, just in case you need to change something. But what you'll notice is that, again, I could age this 100 different times. And instead, what I probably would do is create a view that was more meaningful to me. I might want to pull in purchase order number. I might want to pull in any number of other business relevant information. But from a user perspective, that's how quick and easy the process works. Similarly, on the bank rec product, I could call it what's helpful about this message, and again, it's kind of very intentional. You've selected 2. If anybody has recently or ever historically reconciled a bank account for a bank account and banking activity where you are consuming information that other people have entered, or you're looking at a piece of paper that is a bank statement, oftentimes they are broken up into like transactions, both with a count and a total value. So this was intentional to say, if I look at, say, my prior day banking activity and there are 15 wires in, I would like for this to say 15 if I'm selecting, for wires in. So conceptually pretty simple. User facing, again, depending on how you configure your workspace and how your banking and treasury relationship exists within your bank and your business. This can be pretty powerful. Again, typically utilize workspaces in order to make this a little bit more meaningful, especially if you are using more than one cash transaction type, or if you have more than one cash ledger or more than one banking relationship. So with that, I think we are at the point for questions. I don't know if anything is in the chat. That'd be
not seeing anything in the Q&A. There was some connection commentary, but no questions in the chat. I think this was around the invoice and cash uploads, more of a statement that Al had made that where you had said they're not auto posted, that people like to review and then post. his comment is that it could be auto posted later
Yes.
if the business is confident of the process.
Yes. Very good call out.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, but typically people don't want that certainly to start with. But that is it. If anyone else has any questions, we got about 10 minutes left. Feel free to drop them in there. Obviously, there's my contact info right there. You certainly feel free to reach out to me directly, and be glad to answer anything if you think of something after the fact or want to set up a more personalized demo or pricing info, any of that. I'd be glad to work with you. Let's see. Yes, Martin, certainly be glad to feel free to reach out to me, and be glad to talk with you afterwards. All right, I don't think we have anything else. So Wendy, you'll take care of distributing the recording once it's available. And oh, there is another question. How many different bank files can be managed?
As many as you'd like to create.
Yep.
Yeah, which is, again, kind of the flexibility of it. What we found is that even with, say, a positive pay file, if you had 3 companies, 3 financial divisions, you may have the same bank, but you would have 3 different positive pay files because your account number is different. So you can have redundancy in a similar type, different account. You could have, a number of different formats as far as, again, outbound. You're not beholden to anything that we have set up. It's as customizable as pretty much anything else in PowerLink.
Mm-hmm. Database driven.
Correct.
Another question, customers often require a validation list of the pay list details for approval. Can this product include something similar?
Can you ask that again? I got confused with the term customer payment list.
Customers
Okay.
often require a validation list of the pay list details for
Oh,
approval.
okay. Is that on the inbound cash receipt side? Meaning what got applied, like a acknowledgement of sorts?
Yeah, I'm thinking so.
Yeah, that wouldn't be necessarily part of the product, but I would absolutely urge you to go to the allocations object in PowerLink, and you can build that. So essentially, it's a parent-child relationship that exists natively, independent of an upload of a cash receipt. You can get that now through that allocations object.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then another question, what time frame to implement live after approved to implement? What's Guide's timeline recommendation? Pretty much we have implemented all 3 of these products for customers in under 24 hours. So it's really just becomes a matter of scheduling, but as Claire had alluded to, on all of them, they're pretty intuitive. We give you a little bit of direction, work through some examples with you, but certainly with 3 days or less, all of them could be implemented.
Yeah, and I would add to that it also depends on the complexity of your treasury relationship. If you have, 1, 2 files, 1, 2 banks, that's pretty easy. If you have foreign currency, you're dealing in, European file standards, there are reasons why exceptions, to that would be made. But by and large, if you have, 3 or 5 and 3 and 5 banks, it's not a huge level of effort. I will say we have found, not that it's a recommendation, we have found a lot of people would prefer to do development in production versus tests. You're not doing redundant development, and the reason being is that you're in control of the file and where it goes. There's nothing automatic about it. So we found that people prefer to do that as well, which I think kind of shortens that timeline.
Yep. Another one just came in. Can I create bank files in an international format? Will this support it? Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. There's a lot of flexibility in how you want it to look. You're basically in control.
and to piggyback on that question, that file format does not exist as a baseline. So that implementation timeline could be a little bit longer, which is why as part of the product, there's included consulting hours. Now, if you have, again, positive pay that looks kind of like what we have set up as a baseline, are you going to use them? Probably not. But if you have international file formats and you want more one-on-one time in order to make sure that it is, accurate and in its entirety, that's included as part of that. I don't think it's an SOW, it's a contract.
Another question around security and audit issues. I think that's probably related to where those bank files are stored, and they're on the IFS, so there's 100% security as to who can view them, access them, change them, create them. It's totally up to you, whatever your security and audit policies would be. We get that question a lot, but it'll follow whatever security you have in place or want to put in place. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else come through, so I think we'll call it a wrap here. Like I said, Wendy will send, will the email come from you, Wendy, the follow-up, or?
There will likely be something coming from Teams, and if not, as insurance, there will be an email distributed from me and or Guide Technologies that will contain a link to the recording, which will also be posted on our YouTube channel, and I will be sure to place it on the website as well. We will make sure there is access to this webinar recording.
Yep. All right, well, thank you everyone for your time today. Really appreciate it, and certainly feel free to reach out to my email address there if you have any other follow-up questions you'd like to ask.